Scene script. Have you ever wondered what the early life of a legendary hero might look like? Who was William Wallace before he became Scotland's beacon of hope? Picture a time when Scotland was not yet Scotland and William Wallace was not yet a knight. Wallace's early life is as raw and untamed as the land he would come to defend. Little is known about this period, making it a playground for speculation and debate among historians. The mystery starts with the question of his birthplace. Was it Elderslie in Renfrewshire or Ellerslie in Ayrshire? The debate rages on, with both places claiming the honour of being the cradle of this national hero. Then there's the uncertainty of his parentage. Some say he was the second son of a minor noble, while others argue he was the offspring of an unnamed knight. This enigma adds a layer of intrigue to the man who would become a symbol of Scottish resistance. And what of Wallace's early military experience? It's believed he might have fought as an archer in Edward I's army before his rebellion. If this is true, his time within the English ranks would have offered invaluable insight into their tactics, an advantage he later used to devastating effect. We do know that Wallace's first act of defiance was the killing of an English sheriff in 1297. This act, born of personal vengeance or political rebellion, marked the beginning of his journey from obscurity to legend. While his early years remained shrouded in mystery, Wallace's first known act of defiance against English rule would set the stage for his legendary status. Every hero has a defining moment, and for William Wallace, it was the killing of an English sheriff in 1297. In the late 13th century, Scotland was under the iron grip of English rule. The Scottish people longed for freedom, but it seemed a distant dream. Amidst this backdrop, a spark of defiance was about to ignite, a spark that would eventually set the course of Scottish history on a new path. That spark was a man named William Wallace. Wallace was not born into nobility or wealth. He didn't have the privilege of a knight's training or a lord's education, but what he lacked in advantages, he made up for in courage and a fierce love for his homeland. And it was this love, this burning desire for freedom, that led him to commit his first act of rebellion against the English rule. In the year 1297, an English sheriff was exerting his authority with impunity, mistreating the Scottish people under his jurisdiction. Wallace, unable to bear the sight of his fellow countrymen's suffering, decided that enough was enough. In a bold move, he killed the English sheriff, sending a clear message to the English. The Scots would not be oppressed any longer. News of this act spread like wildfire across Scotland, inspiring others to rise against their oppressors. It was during this time of rising tension and rebellion that Wallace met Andrew Moray, a fellow patriot who shared his vision for a free Scotland. They joined forces, their combined passion and determination fueling a rebellion that would shake the very foundation of English rule in Scotland. This act of defiance, this first bold strike against the English, was more than just a personal vendetta. It was a rallying cry, a beacon for those who yearned for freedom. It was the spark that lit the flame of the Scottish War of Independence. This act of defiance marked the beginning of a rebellion that would change the course of Scottish history. What does it take to defeat a superior enemy force? Let's delve into the Battle of Stirling Bridge and uncover the tactics employed by Wallace. The year was 1297, the battleground Stirling Bridge, a critical crossing over the River Forth in Scotland. Here, Sir William Wallace, alongside Andrew Moray, led a much smaller Scottish force against a formidable English army. The odds were seemingly insurmountable, yet what unfolded was a masterclass in strategic warfare that would go down in history. Wallace and Moray's strategy was a clever exploitation of the terrain. Stirling Bridge was narrow, allowing only a few soldiers to cross at a time. This bottleneck effect negated the English's numerical advantage and leveled the playing field. The Scots waited patiently, and when the moment was right, they struck with deadly precision. As the English began crossing the bridge, the Scots held back, biding their time. They allowed enough of the enemy to cross to form a sizable force, but not so many that they couldn't handle. Then they launched their attack, catching the English off guard. Those who had crossed were quickly overwhelmed, while those still on the bridge found themselves trapped in a deadly squeeze. The result was a resounding Scottish victory. The English, despite their superior numbers, were routed, and the Scots took control of the bridge. But the victory was not without cost. Andrew Moray, Wallace's co-commander, was mortally wounded and died not long after the battle. The Battle of Stirling Bridge was a pivotal moment in the First War of Scottish Independence. It marked the first significant military victory for the Scots and bolstered their resolve to resist English rule. it also established Wallace as a shrewd military leader and a beacon of hope for a free Scotland. The victory at Stirling Bridge was a turning point not just for Wallace but for the entire Scottish rebellion. Every story has its climax, and for Wallace it was his capture and execution by King Edward I of England. The year was 1305. Wallace, the once mighty guardian of Scotland, found himself ensnared in a web spun by the English. His capture, far from the battlefield, was a stark contrast to the heroic tales of his military prowess. It was a silent, covert operation, a bitter end for a man who had once led armies to victory. His trial was a mere formality, a pre-decided spectacle. The charges stacked against him were grave: high treason against King Edward I. The courtroom echoed with accusations, painting Wallace as a traitor, a rebel, a villain. Yet to his people, he was a hero, a beacon of hope, a symbol of Scottish resistance. The verdict was as expected: guilty. The sentence, death. But it wasn't just any death, it was a brutal, public execution, designed to strike fear into the hearts of those who dared to oppose the English crown. Wallace was to be hanged, drawn and quartered, a grisly end for a man of such stature. The day of the execution dawned. Crowds gathered, a morbid curiosity painted on their faces. As Wallace was led to the gallows, he walked with his head held high, unbroken, undeterred. His last moments were not of a man defeated, but of a man standing tall against tyranny. The brutality of his death was a stark message from King Edward II, a warning to those who dared to challenge his rule. Yet it had the opposite effect. Instead of quelling the Scottish rebellion, it ignited a spark, a flame of resistance that would continue to burn for years. In death, Wallace became a martyr, his legacy far outliving the man himself. How does a man become a legend? Let's explore the aftermath of Wallace's death and his enduring legacy. After Wallace's tragic end, the embers of rebellion he kindled refused to be extinguished. Instead, his death sparked a roaring fire that swept across Scotland. His execution for treason by King Edward I of England did not quell the Scottish rebellion as intended. Rather, it added fuel to the already burning desire for independence. His sacrifice became a rallying cry, a beacon of hope in the dark times, reminding his people of what they were fighting for: their homeland, their freedom. Wallace's legacy did not stop at the borders of Scotland. His story transcended time and space, finding a place in literature and popular culture. His portrayal in these mediums, although often romanticized, served to cement his status as a national hero. His name, his deeds, his sacrifice became synonymous with the spirit of Scotland, fierce, resilient, and unyielding. In the realm of war tactics, Wallace's strategies continue to be studied and revered. Despite often being outnumbered, his clever use of terrain and morale-boosting leadership led to victories that seemed impossible. His tactical genius at the Battle of Stirling Bridge remains a testament to his military prowess, studied by scholars, strategists, and enthusiasts. Even centuries later, the name William Wallace resonates with a sense of pride and nationalism. His life, his battles, his death, and the legacy he left behind have become an integral part of Scottish identity. From statues and monuments to films and literature, his story is retold, reminding us of a man who fought against all odds for the freedom of his people. And so, from a man of uncertain beginnings, William Wallace became a symbol of courage and freedom, his story inspiring generations long after his death.